With the angling side of it, as far as recreation is concerned, and us, we don't go out to target sharks. And this what happened about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. Unfortunately, a fisherman, one of his sons, young son, got hold of the shark. They cut the head off the shark. I wasn't here at the time. I was away in Sodwana Bay, and he paraded this head of the shark just like a kid would probably found a dead snake going around and giving everybody frights with the head of a snake or something like that. And he was parading this thing. I wasn't here, so I really can't say much about it. But yes, it's not in the light that shouldn't have been done. But at the same time, every single day, especially in season, and especially summer season, when the charter boats go out and recreational boats go out, there's nothing under about 400 to 500 or 600 fish per day that are killed and caught and brought out of that ocean. So it's been taken out the system. And those they go back onto exactly the same slab where the sharks were, where you see the pictures in the Facebook and some of the newspapers where you see their heads lying on the slab. They only show you the shark heads. They didn't show you the other 400 fish that have been gutted and cleaned up and, as the divers would say, slaughtered. You know, the funny thing is when we catch a fish, it's called a caught fish. And when you get a shark, it's not a caught shark, it's a murdered shark or a slaughtered shark. So, yeah, it makes it very difficult. So at the same time, it's very sensationalism coming probably from the diving side of it. And I believe if this whole thing could have been prevented if they'd have just come to us and say, what are we going to do about it? Or how can we come to some arrangement to stop the people slaughtering the sharks. And they're not slaughtering the sharks, believe me.
Anton, but what they say, the diving charters, they say their business depends on sharks. In other words, in the sense that when they take divers down, they want to show them sharks. And because of the slaughtering, as they call it, of sharks by fishermen, there are no sharks for the divers to interact with. And then they mention certain individual sharks that they've seen over the years that are there, that are not there now. I think about 2 or 3 years ago they even mentioned, or they had a specific shark that they pointed out having been caught by a fisherman and killed. You know, one of the sharks that they interacted with for quite a few years. So what you're saying is, if the fishermen catch sharks, they return them, or do they keep them?
No, the fishermen return them. And 99% of the time, by the time they get the shark close to the boat, the shark is so big, or it jumps around so much that it breaks the line. If it doesn't break the line, 9 out of 10 times they'll cut the line and let the shark go to freedom. That hook that goes into the shark's mouth or any fish's mouth, normally, I'm not a scientist and I haven't done a test on it, but I'm also a diver and I've dived quite a lot, and I haven't seen many fish, I'll be honest with you, many fish going around with lots of hooks in their mouths. There are a couple, naturally, that in some areas it's probably more predominant, but all my years of diving, I've never seen I've seen one, it was in a potato bass in Mozambique. But other than that, I've never seen it. So 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, that hook comes out of the fish's mouth or the shark's mouth. It gets from all that saliva and what have you, it corrodes those hooks, and then they don't have that problem anymore. So yeah, we don't go out and target them whatsoever. Your question was about the shark dive. Yes, our reef here, and probably a little bit in Alawal. Alawal is a fantastic reef. It's a beautiful reef. It comes up to about 12, 14 meters in some areas, and it's a very nice dive. It's a coral dive, it's a reef dive. They've got wrecks and they've got everything here, so it's an excellent diving area. So there's some chaps here that also do the shark dive. So you've got everything there basically on Alawal Shoal. Where our reef here, we're running in a current here most of the times between sort of 1.5 knots to 3.5 knots. So it's quite an extreme, what we call an extreme dive. So you're not long on the reef unless they go down into the caves where they go and see the raggies. And at the moment now, there's no real. It's out of raggy season, and now the other sharks are coming in, the Zambezi and the tiger and what have you. So yeah, definitely on Protea Reef, it is more of a shark dive. Internationally, it's advertised as a shark dive, rather than a wreck dive or a coral dive. So yes, so the shark here on Protea Reef is a definite. They need the dive companies, the dive charter companies here definitely need the sharks.
Okay, but now the $60,000 question: what is the solution? How do you see the way forward?
As I said earlier on, that the recreationals on fishing on the pelagic and endemic fish, there's quite a big record of sharks, and trying to work out numbers of sharks and where they're coming from, where they, of fish, not sharks, where they come from and where they go to, and their feeding and what have you. Where the shark is, there's no history on sharks. No one really can say, you can pick up anything and say, yeah, what is happening, where the shark comes from. We believe that they come up with probably the sardine shoals, and then when they see Protea Reef here, because it's such a prolific reef, and of course the fishermen that go out there and the dive charters that go out there, they chum the waters. That is why our ski boat club, our club, put into practice 4 years ago a restricted area where we don't want anybody to use any bait fishing. They're only allowed to go with lures through it. No bait, no chumming allowed in this area. It's a cordoned off area between the southern pinnacle and the northern pinnacle. And that area, from the end of July until the 1st of December, it's closed for everybody. So what it's trying to do now is to try and detract the sharks away from it, because it's just like a bird feeder. If you take a bird feeder and you start feeding birds, the first day that you put the bird feeder up, we're getting 2-3 birds, and the next day 10 birds, and then a week later there's 40 birds, and then a year later they're knocking on your window to put more food in it. And Protea Reef is exactly the same as that. So the sharks are becoming resident. When this unfortunate thing that they said it was one of their pet sharks, because it's got a big scar on his head, which could have been from a bang stick or somebody that spiked him or something like that, which we believe was actually one of the what we call sparrows fishing on it. They got bang sticks, and we think it's a sparrow damage, not a recreational damage. And he's been marked, and they call him, because it's got this round mark or hole in his head, they call him Holy Moly. Now that shark, he's there, he's resident, because they see him every time, or just about every dive they do, a baited dive, which we will come into now. They do a baited dive, and of course the shark comes in, and Holy Moly is a tiger shark. Now on this, and unfortunately in the press and the media and international news, it was a tiger shark called Holy Moly. And in the meantime it wasn't. Those Holy Moly, I take a guess, I've seen, Roland showed me videos of it on his tablet. He showed me videos of it and showed me the markings on the thing long before this even happened. And I'd estimate that shark in probably between 160 and 180 kilograms. So, and those fish on the slab that we hear, I don't think one of those weighed over 70 kilograms.
But Anton, in the light of what you've just said, I mean, isn't it time, and we're running out of video time, but isn't it time now that the two sides sit down and work out a win-win situation?
Look, we've decided, long time ago, we've asked them, guys, please just all sit together and talk about it. But now we talk about chumming now. Remember I said we made this red area. It's up on the board. If you go, you can take a shot of it just now outside the control tower. You'll see Protea Reef, and you'll see where we've demarcated this area to keep out of it, to try and to get the sharks away from them. But the divers themselves come there with chum buckets full of chum. They probably chum, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 kilograms of sardine bait, out of boxes, and they crash it in, and they lower this thing down to 10 meters from the surface, and then of course they attract the sharks. They normally, believe it or not, the carcasses that have come off that slab where the sharks' heads were on, the same carcasses of tunny and everything go to Roland. Roland sends his crew to go and buy the carcasses there, and he ties that up around this baited buoy that goes down, so that attracts the sharks in, and they come and eat.
Okay, but now doesn't this mean that there is no solution to the problem?
Well, obviously. So, on the one hand, it's okay to have sharks. On the other hand, it's not okay. We're trying to get away from it, trying to stop the shark infestation, because we honestly believe all the chumming. If you read all the films that you see, and you go down to Cape Town, how do they get the great whites to the cages? They chum it. Now I think they're trying to get a law passed there that they're not allowed to chum anymore, because the fish is just like the bird. The shark is now going to think just like a bird, and that's a feeding place, and they're not going to leave there. But there's definitely, if you interview anybody that uses the ocean, and we must remember one thing: we are not targeting sharks. That's the least of our, of anybody's problem. All we want to do is go out there and catch fish. But if you speak right up the coast, right up to Mozambique, there is a problem with sharks. How are we going to sort it out? That's now up to the scientists. We've got to get people, and the solution would be now to start monitoring, tagging. They haven't tagged. Where's a tag? I haven't heard of a tagging thing. So give the fishermen a tag and let them tag these sharks, so that you can say there was a tiger shark, we tagged it. Then put the dates and times, estimated length. We got ropes. The fishermen have gone to such extent that we got certain measuring things that we can measure a marlin next to the boat and say estimate its weight within about 10-15 kilos. They've done nothing about that with the shark. They're not looking after their environment. We're looking after ours, but they're not looking after their environment. So to me, the first thing is they all working on, when I say they, the environmentalists on the sharks, and the people that are all like the new Save Our Sharks campaign that they got at the moment. They need to get more scientific data of what and why the sharks and where they're coming from and why they're proliferating. Because normally, there's normally a balance, and if we talk about balance, we're removing 400, say in seasons, and say probably 5 months of the year, we're moving in this base. We're removing about 400 to 500 fish a day from that environment. So what's happening to the sharks? They're staying there. It's like taking all the lions out of the Kruger National Park. So it's just going to proliferate. So,
Anton, thank you. Unfortunately, we have to stop there. Thank you very much, Anton.
Okay, pleasure.